if you would help me welcome John to the stage.
As I've been listening to the Lord and asking him what I believe he wants said in this time, I don't want to say anything that he doesn't want said, but I've been asking him and was up very early this morning praying and just waiting upon the Lord saying, what do you want said to this room full of people who I don't know? And if you tune out after this or you got to take a call and check out, there's one sentence I want you to hear. In God's economy, you are kings. I think this is what God once said, and I'd like to unpack that a little bit, but I'll say it again. In God's economy, you are kings and queens. In God's economy, you are kings and queens. Now, I didn't say you're the king, because we know who the king of all kings is, and that's certainly not you and certainly not me. But when we look in the Old Testament, we see there's three categories of spiritual leaders. Prophets, who would speak to the people on behalf of God. Priests, who would take the needs of the people back to God. And kings, who controlled more of the resources and more of the relationships than anybody. And isn't that what you do? You're involved in more relationships than most, and you're controlling more resources than most. Some of those are yours and some of those aren't yours. And in the Old Testament, these were spiritual leaders, not just financial leaders. We see in the book of Nehemiah has this role of a king. He's actually working under a king. And he goes and he partners with Ezra, the priest. And when these guys team up, they rebuild the walls of Jerusalem in 52 days. Now you go, what would have happened had Nehemiah not been in that story? And it was just the preacher, just the pastor. The wall would not have been rebuilt. Nehemiah was a governor. He was overseeing people and resources and teams of people to get the project done. And many of you could do that much better than people like me. But I want you to hear the sentence because I do believe this is from God. In his economy, you are kings. I want that to land on your heart. But my question is, in God's economy, how do kings operate? Because we see how the kings of this world operate when all is blessed, all blessings abides in their life, and they amass large amounts of resources, and they're in control of powerful relationships. I'm going to read to you from a little obscure passage in Deuteronomy 17. And this is before Israel and the people of God ever had a king. They had Moses, and he was a prophet leading the people. They had the Levites, who were the priests, and they were governing the sacrificial system. But there's this chapter, this little section, Deuteronomy 17, that Moses is getting the people of God ready to have a king when they finally get into the land. And these are the instructions for kings. Deuteronomy 17, verse 14. Talking about when you come into the land of Canaan, and here's what he says. When you come to the land that the Lord your God is giving you, and you possess it, and dwell in it, and then say, I will set a king over me, like all the nations that are around me. You may indeed set a king over you, whom the Lord your God will choose. One from among your brothers you shall set as king over you. You may not put a foreigner over you who is not your brother. Only he must not acquire many horses for himself, or cause the people to return to Egypt in order to acquire many horses. Since the Lord has said to you, you shall never return that way again. And he shall not acquire many wives for himself, lest his heart turn away. Nor shall he acquire for himself excessive silver and gold. And when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, he shall write for himself in a book a copy of this law approved by the Levitical priests. And it shall be with him. He shall read in it all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear the Lord his God by keeping all the words of this law and these statutes and doing them, that his heart may not be lifted up above his brothers, and that he may not turn aside from the commandment, either to the right hand or to the left, so that he may continue long in his kingdom, he and his children in Israel. These are the laws and the instructions concerning Israel's kings. And I cannot believe how current they are for us today. If you're not following Christ and you're in control of a large amount of wealth, what are 3 things that you do? You increase your horsepower. You get a bigger car, faster car, more cars. You generally get more women, girlfriends, prostitutes, women on the side, second wives, third wives, fourth wives. And you acquire for yourself excessive silver and gold. Apart from Jesus Christ, this is where wealth goes. It turns inward, and it's all about me, my desires, my pleasure, and everything that my heart wants. And where it goes is where God warns them thousands of years ago. I can't believe how current this is. He must not acquire for himself many horses. He shall not acquire for himself many wives, nor shall he acquire for himself excessive silver and gold. Horsepower, women, and bank accounts is where wealth goes, detached from Jesus. And God says, the antidote for my king, the thing that I want my kings to be utterly preoccupied with, is they are to hand copy the Bible, the book of Exodus probably, and Leviticus and Numbers. Hand copy this into their own book and read it every day of their life. The financial leaders, the resource leaders, the relationship leaders in God's kingdom are supposed to be people of the book. Preeminently of this book, passionate about this book, gripped by this book so that they handwrite a copy and read it every day. That's what God wanted for his financial leaders. And I believe that's what he still wants for his kings. Are you preoccupied with this book? Does this book dominate your mind and heart more than excessive silver and gold, horsepower, and women? This is what it means to be one of God's kings in God's economy. He deeply, deeply cares about your heart. And he knows that wealth and power and relationships have great potential to lift us up. And so he says, keep your nose in this book that your heart may not be lifted up above your brothers. The kings in God's economy are meant to be servants. Servants. And the only way to stay a servant is to realize you are a servant. And the only way to realize you are a servant is to realize who your master is. And you get it from this book. Kings in God's economy.